Right. I think we are live. Let's give a 1 minute.
Yes, we can kick off at the top of the hour.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Technology is in
I
place.
think this topic many will find interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It's sort of an offbeat topic as well. You know, not your run-of-the-mill topic.
Yeah. Correct. Correct. And I think that's why we wanted to cover because it's start of the year. So if they
Mm.
start thinking about it, that will be great. Okay. It's 10 o'clock here and
All right,
8:30 at your end, I believe. Yeah.
that's right. All set.
Go
We
ahead.
can kick off then. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to whoever is joining from across the globe and then listening into this. My name is Shantanu Kelkar, and here we are again in episode number 12 of our podcast series on where strategy meets execution. And as we were just discussing before kickoff, today we have come up with a very offbeat and but still a very timely topic for SMBs. It's not your run-of-the-mill AI hype topic, but it's really something that you can utilize to really drive your business much further on a global scale. We are thinking global now. So let's deep dive into it, and let me start off by giving a very quick introduction for myself. As I mentioned, my name is Shantanu Kelkar. I am the founder and principal consultant at 1.618 Business Consulting. I have about 20 plus years of experience working with automation companies such as Emerson Process Management, Honeywell Automation, and then market research and consulting firms such as Frost and Sullivan. My background has been mostly in strategy formulations, product marketing, and so forth. And in 1.618, my current venture, I am working with small, medium businesses to help them deploy these strategies and make sure that it just doesn't stay as a PPT. They are actually able to take the strategies and execute them and get to some meaningful results from that. So that's where I am. And again, today joined by Aniket. Aniket, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Shantanu. Good morning to folks in US and good evening to folks in India and rest part of the world, eastern part of the world. Um uh, I'm glad to share this stage with Shantanu. Today's topic is special, but let me just give my introduction first. I'm Aniket. I have 15 plus years of experience, basically managing complex project from start to end. I Throughout my experience, I have worked with Fortune 500 companies like Amazon, Cummins, uh, and currently working for a one consultancy company, but deploying some robotics automation solutions for a medical manufacturing company. Um, so I'm here to talk to the SMB people and solve their problems. You can see my records up there on the slide. Proud to have like $9.6 million saving in Amazon while I was working there for a warehouse automation. That's coming up. That's picking up a lot of steam, and it's picking up a lot of eyes as well as we go towards fully robotic automations here in US. Um, but yes, I have a Six Sigma Lean Six Sigma certification as well as Operation Excellence certification. Uh, but more than those certification, I enjoy solving a real life problem, and weighing in my experience to solve those complex problems and add value to the industry leaders. So today's topic is very interesting for me, and we just at this, as this is a start of the year, we would like to get this topic in front of all the SMBs leader to start thinking about it. What is the benefit of hiring a global talent? What is the concepts of having a fractional SMEs, fractional CTOs, things like that to solve your problem. We'll dive deep into it, but just keep an open mind, and we would urge you to engage with us through our platform, through LinkedIn and YouTube, and start communicating with us to know, so that we'll know what are the problems you are facing. With that, we'll get started, Shantanu.
Yeah,
um,
let's do that. Yeah. So, Aniket, as you said, we are diving into what we call the small but global model. I think
mm,
oftentimes SMBs have been talking about companies, large scale multinational companies, and trying to compare themselves with them and saying that they have the kind of scale and they have the kind of muscle, both financial as well as global reach, competencies that set them apart. So it's difficult to emulate them. Things that work in those global corporations need not or may not work for small medium businesses.
yep,
But that's not true. In fact, the topic that we are dealing with today is exactly what SMBs can do to uh, to emulate, or I would even say that do some things better than what global corporations are able to do with
correct.
their resources, and with the use of automation and AI in that, really kickstart a step change in their growth. Right. So this is for SMB founders running teams of 10 to 500 people. That's the segment that we are talking about,
Yes.
who want to tap into global talent uh, by using fractional executives. It's a term that we'll frequently use in this, and as we go through the discussions, you'll know what those really are. And then remote teams, but while using that, they don't want to get buried in compliance nightmares.
Yeah.
That's the focus today.
Yeah, and there are a lot of nightmares out there also, right, Chandan? Like,
Yeah.
for example, when I was at Amazon, we had an entire department handling multi-state compliances. But most SMBs, whether it is in US or India, they don't have that luxury, right?
They don't, yeah. And we spoke with a lot of experts. We also dug out a lot of data, and what we put together something called the Scale Smart framework. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll go through that shortly. But while we do that, we'll also go through the macro trends, the regulatory landmines that one
Absolutely.
might encounter while they are on this journey, the technology decisions that they might need to take,
Correct.
and finally we'll give you a practical 30, 60, 90-day action plan to implement these compliances or competencies in your own organization, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah. No, right. So I think the exact summary here, before we deep dive into each of the individual areas, there are three things here. The bottom line. Let's give the listeners the bottom line up front. Like three things are happening simultaneously that every SMB leader needs to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So first one, the fractional executive economy has exploded. We are talking 120,000 fractional executives now, which is already up from 60,000 just 2 years ago. So that's 100% increase in 2 years. And by the end of this year, the estimates are that roughly 35% of US companies will have at least one fractional executive on their team. So fractional executives are nothing but they are not full-time employees
Mm.
on roles of the companies, but the roles and responsibilities that they discharge are similar to having an FTE
Correct.
without the overheads and without the burden. So that's a fractional executive for you. Right.
Yes. And that matches what I'm seeing. When I left Amazon, I started consulting. I was surprised
Mm.
how many founders were bringing in fractional CFOs, or how many,
Mm.
fractional operation leaders. In fact, I had a recruiter call last year, like they were asking me for, offering my fractional services to some
Mm.
organization here in US. So yeah, that trend is picking up here in US, and
Mm.
I believe it is just a matter of time to be picked up
Mm.
in the rest part of the world. So it's not
Mm.
a temporary thing. I think it is a structural shift.
Absolutely. And the second thing here, which
Mhm.
is the regulatory technology, uh, it's also uh, going hand in hand with this kind of a change in, or this kind of a trend. And one thing, that one statement or one statistics here that caught me off guard was the commonly cited statistic for regulatory technology growth is about 9% annually,
Yeah,
which is not right. The actual growth rate is 20 to 30% per year.
correct.
The Reg-Tech, as we call it, that market is growing from 19 billion last year to about over 80 billion by 2032 in the next 6 years. Right? So
That's a, that's a staggering number. And can you tell me, Shantanu, why does that matter for an SMB owner?
Yeah, so it uh, tells you that the regulators are automating enforcement.
Hmm.
Sort of tax authorities, labor boards, they are using these tools to find non-compliance faster. So if they are using that, it's imperative that you are
Ah,
also using the technology to keep pace. If you are still managing your compliance manually, then you are playing a losing game.
absolutely, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. To be fair, yeah. And what's the third trend out there? What's the third
So
trend?
the third one is, global talent access is real. As I said, no longer do SMBs have to have that, for lack of any other word, an inferiority complex. That I am constrained or restrained in this one geography, and I'm not able to expand globally. Although there are opportunities out there which I can really play into. I have the competencies to do that, but then I don't have access. So that's not going to be an excuse or a reason anymore. Global talent access is now real. It's not simple, obviously, but if you see, about 64 countries, they offer digital nomad visas.
Correct,
Of course, the catch is that hiring someone through one of these programs doesn't eliminate your tax risk. If that person is generating revenue for you, signing contracts, uh, you may have created what's called a permanent establishment in that country. So as soon as you have someone um, working for you in a way,
correct.
that means that you have some sort of an establishment in that region, and that also means that you owe, or you could owe, corporate taxes in that country.
Yeah, yeah. Good point, Shantanu. And I remember dealing with this at Cummins when we had field engineers in different countries. Uh, the tax implication for that, like were complicated even for a company with a full legal team.
Right, exactly. And moreover, I think one more thing that should concern SMBs is that small businesses spend about 69-70% more per employee on compliance than
Yeah.
larger companies.
Yes,
So since they don't have the economies of scale as what a global organization or a
correct,
large MNC would have, they do incur higher costs, and at the same time they also have to follow the same rules.
correct.
So that's a catch there.
So the playing field is not level, huh?
It's not. And there is obviously a brighter side to that. There is good news that if you approach this strategically,
Hmm.
you can turn compliance from a liability into a competitive advantage. So
Hmm.
that's where, as we mentioned earlier, we have the scale smart framework. It's
Hmm.
all about how you can still convert this challenge into an opportunity.
All right. So walk us through this framework, Shantanu. What does this scale smart? What does this
Yeah,
exactly
again,
do?
yeah, it's very simple. I think, Aniket, what I really like about our conversations, discussions, it's we have been able to really put it, declutter all other things and really put it in some sort of a framework, some sort of a list which people can really understand and also remember. So again, this Scale Smart framework, it has 5 pillars. SCALE. S is for size triggers.
Hmm.
So you need to map the regulatory cliffs that hit at, let's say, 10 or 50 or 100 number of employees,
Hmm.
and the companies need to strategically plan on when to cross these thresholds. They have to
Hmm.
cross them intentionally, not accidentally. Right?
Okay. So the 50 employee cliff, is that a big one, right?
Yeah, that's the big one. It's quite brutal in some senses because we'll get into the details, but that's where the in the US the Affordable Care Act kicks in.
Hmm.
FMLA leave requirements, EEO1 reporting. Most founders we talk to, they don't realize that their compliance costs can uh, jump 40 to 50% just by crossing that threshold. From
Wow.
49 employees to 50 employees uh, means that their compliance costs jump by up to 50%. Right?
Oh, wow.
So
And what's
that's
the
a
C?
that's a catch there. C is compliance architecture. So again, the decision here is simple. Buy compliance technology, purchase it. Don't try to build it or manage it manually. Given that there's 20 to 30% growth, as we mentioned earlier, in the
Yeah,
Reg-Tech tools market, the tools are getting better and cheaper. Manual compliance is frankly an uninsurable risk at this point. Right?
correct.
So
And yeah, that makes sense, right? And I remember at Amazon, we automated everything we could because the
hmm.
cost of errors in compliance is just too high.
Exactly. And A is the automation threshold, right? As you
Uh-huh.
pointed out. Um, what we looked at, Aniket, was we saw that ROI
Yes,
on HR automation kicks in at around 2 million in revenue and about
yes,
30 distributed employees, whichever comes first. It's usually around that time that the ROI starts kicking in.
correct.
And there are platforms like Rippling or Deal who can reduce the HR admin work by about 90%. So that's a
Wow,
big
90%.
leverage that, yeah, that's a big
That's a
leverage
big,
that you get.
90% is big. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what the data shows now. Even if you discount some of the outliers in that, you would still be about at 60-70%, and
hmm.
that's still a very significant number. So if you think about it, automated onboarding, automatic tax withholding calculations across states, benefit enrollments, all the stuff that used to require dedicated HR staff is now being handled by these automation tools.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what about the L,
Labor.
the letter L?
Yeah. So the next one, the labor model here, this is the EOR versus entity decision. EOR
Hmm.
stands for employer of record. So
Hmm.
those are companies that sort of carry the manpower.
Hmm.
Companies like Deal, Remote, or Oyster, they become the legal employers for your international hires. Those
Hmm.
international hires are not on your boards or in your books. They are with these companies, and these companies handle all the local compliances. So the rule of thumb that we usually recommend is rule of 10, as we call it.
Correct.
Use an EOR if you have fewer than 10 employees in a country. Now, once you are scaling past that 10 to 12 or 15 employees threshold in one given market at one given location in a country, then start thinking about establishing your own
Own
entity.
entity.
So yeah, so again, the thing here is that go start small or start slow and use these techniques, tools, use these companies, use these platforms till you reach a point where you are confident enough to start an entity, a legal entity of your own.
Correct. That makes sense from a cost perspective too, right? Your fees, they can quickly add up when you have a lot of people.
Exactly. And lastly, what it says here is ecosystem resilience. So this is about culture and operations. You need to build an async first culture. We'll come to that uh, in detail in some of the later slides. But build that async first culture. Document everything in a company wiki or a
Hmm.
dashboard somewhere. And the mantra is simple. If it is written down, it exists. If it is not written down, it doesn't exist.
Correct.
It's
I
as
love
simple
that
as
framework because when I was leading the distributed teams, documenting was everything. It's very crucial.
that.
You can't rely on the Slack messages or halfway conversation. hallway conversations when your team is just spread across the zones, right? You need a clear documentation. So
Absolutely.
absolutely. Let's move on to the next one. Macro line spec.
Yeah.
Let's dig into this data. Like there are three major vectors, right, driving this small but global trend.
Absolutely. So let's see what's vector one.
Yeah, the vector, like it's about like fractional economy. I mentioned that numbers, right? 60,000 to
Mm.
120,000
Mm.
practitioners in 2 years. That's huge, right? But
Yeah.
if you break down that, where there is this talent is concentrated. Let's
Mm.
suppose marketing, the fractional CMO
Mm.
role accounts for 30% of the market
Mm.
totally. And
Interesting.
then if you
Okay.
look at operation, it is 16% of that. Sales is about roughly 10%, and HR and finance round up about top 5%.
Mm. Okay. It's interesting to see that marketing is 30%. That's the biggest
Mm.
category. Why do you think that is the
Good
case?
question. Good question. And that's where the most SMBs need high level marketing strategy. So for a product
Mm-hmm.
launch, a pivot, entering a new market, they need this like good team around them. And but they don't just need a full time CMO at
Mm-hmm.
300K a year. A fractional
Mm-hmm.
CMO at 8,000 to 12,000 a month gives them an
Mm-hmm.
access to the same expertise on a part time basis. So it's a no brainer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay, interesting. And what about this CGO role, Chief Growth Officer role? You know, these days they put anything between C and O. They are actually
Sure.
calling it CXO, so you replace that X with any other letter. But I've been
Absolutely.
hearing about CGO quite frequently
It
and
is.
lately. So,
It's
yeah.
a, and I've been seeing this lately, start of 20, I mean, late 2023, or like, start of the 2024. That's a big emerging trend.
Mhm.
CGO demand is up to 280% year over year. Uh,
Mhm.
Basically, the CHO combines sales, marketing, customer success under one just strategic leader, right?
Mhm.
So for companies in that 5 to 20 million revenue range, it's often the right move because you can't afford three separate VPs. You just need
Mhm.
someone
Interesting.
aligning the whole revenue just
Mm.
under one engine, right?
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, that's true. So what's the next vector then? Vector two?
Yeah, the next vector, it's a Reg-Tech reality check.
Mm.
I want to hammer this point because it changes how founders should think about compliance.
Mhm.
9% growth figure that gets cited everywhere. You talked about it earlier, but that's for the broader regulatory compliance market, which includes legacy industries. If you
Mhm.
look down the software based RegTech market,
Mhm.
that those tools relevant to SMBs managing remote teams and
Mm.
often payroll, that is growing around 22 to 30% annually, right?
Okay, great, great, great. And I'm sure that difference matters, right? 9% versus 30%. That tells us something.
Absolutely. Like, because think about it, because it tells you where the money is flowing, right?
Hmm.
Where the venture capital is pouring into a compliance automation, uh, there will be two things that will happen, right? First one is the tools will get better. The second
Mhm.
one is regulators starts using similar technologies to catch violations. So it's an
Hmm.
arm race, I would say.
Hmm.
But if you're still using spreadsheets and quarterly check-ins with your accountants, you're literally bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Been watching a lot of Wild West movies lately, it seems.
Yeah.
All right. So what's vector three then?
Yeah, the vector three is very important. I think geopolitical shifts, right? We are seeing right now, yeah, we're seeing what some analysts call the splinter net of labor, right?
Hmm.
On one hand, you have a friend shoring, government pressurizing companies to hire from allied nation, and on the other hand, you have 64 countries now often offer like digital nomad visas, trying to
Hmm.
attract the remote workers, right?
Oh, oh, great. Yeah. So that's, I think, more options, but then more complexity as well.
Absolutely. It comes with absolutely complexity, right? Hand in hand. But here is something a lot of founders miss.
Hmm.
It's a wage arbitrage that made this
Hmm.
global hiring attractive 5 years ago. That
Hmm.
is like evaporating now because of all this global shift. Senior
Mm.
developers in Lagos or Bangalore now command salaries compared to secondary US markets like Austin or Denver. So you're not
Mm.
hiring globally because it's cheap anymore. You are hiring
Mm.
globally because you can't find a talent locally. That's
Mm.
the bottom line.
Interesting. But I think I'm sure that requires a big mindset shift.
Absolutely,
It's
it does.
really a fundamental change in how you are working.
How you think, 100%, and that's where the I think the market shift will, like, the economics of scale will
Mm.
demand that, and that will eventually lead to the answer that SME will seek.
Mm.
Let's look into this regulatory staircase.
Mm.
Right, let's get into the specific. Shantanu, you mentioned 10, 50, and 100 employee threshold, right?
Correct.
So can
Right,
you
right.
walk us through what actually changes at each level?
Right, absolutely. So, let's go step by step. At let's say 10 employees, you hit what is called the safety threshold.
Hmm.
OSHA recording requirements kick in. Then you need to maintain formal records of work-related injuries and illnesses. And here's the surprising part. This applies to home offices too. It's not just that if you have an official address, only then will you be covered or will you need to comply with this. Even if you are having people work from home in these locations, remote locations, these requirements kick in. So if a remote employee gets a repetitive strain injury while working from their house or from their bedroom, that's potentially recordable,
Oh, that
and
seems
would
hard to
be
enforce.
asked to. Yes, it is. And the liability exists at, as you go further at 15 employees, Title 7 and the Americans with Disabilities Act, those acts kick in, they start applying. You are now subject to federal anti-discrimination regulations as well. So it just keeps on getting more complicated and comprehensive.
Wow. And that the big one at 50.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we are calling it, the compliance avalanche. It just comes up in an exponential scale at you. Three major things happen simultaneously. First, you become an what is called an applicable large employer under the Affordable Care Act. You must offer health insurance to at least 95% of your full-time workforce. So that's a requirement under that act. If you don't do that, you face penalties of 2,500, roughly that amount, to
Wow.
$4,000 per employee. You know,
Per employee.
so
Wow.
per employee, yeah. And there's more to that. FMLA kicks in, the Family and Medical Leave Act, that
Yeah.
becomes applicable as well. You must provide up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave for qualifying conditions. The tracking requirements are complex, especially for intermittent leave, right? So that's also you need to
Wow.
look out for. Yeah.
And what's intermittent leave?
So let's say someone is undergoing some treatment, let's say for a cancer treatment, a chemotherapy, and let's say they need to take 3 hours off twice a week. That's how
Hmm.
chemos are generally scheduled. So you have to track that separately from a regulator point of view. So if you
PTO.
fire someone for attendance issues without realizing they were technically on protected leave, you are looking at a wrongful termination lawsuit, right?
Wow.
So you just have to uh, think uh, very, one or two levels deep in that case. And third, the EEO1 reporting begins. So you are submitting demographic data to the EEOC annually, right? So
What's the
that
trap you mentioned? The look back trap?
Yeah, so that's right. The ALE status, whether you are an applicable large engineer, is determined by your average workforce size in the prior calendar year. So if you hire aggressively in Q4 thinking that you'll deal with compliance later, you might inadvertently, unknowingly trigger ALE status
Hmm.
for the entire following year. So people don't realize that how the timings are set, and
Wow,
they if they miss that point, you won't find it out until it's too late. Right.
that's nasty, right? What about 100 employees?
Right. So at 100, EEO1 reporting becomes more detailed. And if you're in a position where you might need to do layoffs,
Hmm.
which happens in volatile markets, in every industry cycle, there are uh, every 2 or 3 years, there are instances where you might want to do or need to do it. If you're doing that, then the WARN Act kicks in, the WARN, the WARN Act that kicks in. You must give 60 days notice to those employees who you are laying off. And if you miss that requirement, you owe 60 days of back pay to every affected employee.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be that massive.
So the message is, I think, know exactly where you stand related to those thresholds, right?
Exactly. And when you plan your growth around them, don't accidentally stumble over a cliff.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's next. I think
Right.
we covered
So,
this.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
th- yes, let's look at this. So let's talk about Nexus.
Mhm.
When does a company have a taxable presence somewhere? I think it's the previous slide, I believe.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Tax Nexus. Yeah. So when does a company have a taxable presence somewhere? Let's look into that.
Yeah, this is something I deal with extremely extensively in supply chain. I think
Mhm.
it's a hidden killer for distributed SMBs. I think rule is
Mhm.
simple and very very straightforward, but brutal. Hiring a single remote employee in a new state or a country creates what's called a physical presence nexus.
Mhm. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so
Again.
so four things can happen, right? One, you now have a tax nexus in that state. You might
Mhm.
have to collect sales tax on all sales into that state, not just sales generated by that employee. And two, you need to register for unemployment insurance. That's
Mhm.
very important. And three is you need a workers compensation coverage that complies with that state's rule, whichever states
Mhm.
that employees in. And the last one, fourth, is depending on the state, a portion of your entire company's income might be subjected to that state's corporate taxes through
Mhm.
the appointment formulas.
Okay, okay. So let's say you just have one hire in a state like California, that could affect your company-wide tax bill.
Exactly, exactly. And California and New York are particularly aggressive about this. And there are what I call sleeper risk, snowboard scenario. Right? If an employee spends the winter in Florida or Texas, you're
Mhm.
potentially created an excess there. Utah
Mhm.
have a 20-day threshold, I believe. And I think most states have no minimum. Technically, one day of a work can trigger withholding requirements.
Interesting. Okay. And what about international establishment?
That's where permanent establishment risk comes in. If you hire someone internationally, say a sales executive in UK, or someone in maybe other part of like the world, maybe in Asia, that person has authority to negotiate and sign contracts on your behalf. So
Mm-hmm.
HMRC, they might determine you have a permanent establishment,
Mm-hmm.
which what that means is your company UK source the company's UK source profits, they are now taxable in the UK at their corporate rate
Mm.
on top of what you are paying in the US.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I think we had that Germany case study when we were doing this
Correct.
research, right? I think
Yeah.
let's talk
Yeah.
about that. It's a good cautionary tale.
It is, and sure, and so a US startup hired a contractor in Germany,
Mm.
so they didn't use an EOR, which we got earlier. They did not establish an entity. 6 months later, German authorities reclassified that contractor as an employee, and then the startup owed that backdated income taxes, social
Wow.
contribution, retroactive employment rights, all that. and total penalty was huge, like over 50,000 pounds.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would an EOR, what would have cost?
Oh, it would have cost just like 7,000 pound, 7,000 to 7,200 over for a year. That's mad. That should just keep founders up at right night, I would say.
That's seven times the cost that you
Absolutely.
would have borne. All right. So let's look at that EOR thing a bit more detail. So how do you make EOR versus own entity decision then?
Yeah. So this is very important, right? It comes down to five factors: setup costs, time to hire, monthly cost, compliance risk, and control. Right? So EOR wins on setup, nearly zero cost versus $15,000 to $25,000 to establish a foreign entity. EOR wins on time, so you can have someone onboarded in 1 to 3 weeks versus 2 to 6 months. Right? That's
Mhm.
crazy. And EOR wins on compliance as well. They handle it, not you. They just
Mhm.
handle all the compliance risks. So entity wins on long term cost once you scale, right? Entity
Mhm.
wins on control as well because especially for IP protection, that's
Right.
also advantage.
Okay. So that rule of 10 makes sense then. EOR for speed and risk mitigation, an entity when scaling. You
Correct,
can
right?
clearly make that distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where generally we propose like hybrid approach. Many companies use
Mm.
start with an EOR to test a market. Start with that framework, and then if it works, then you are hiring beyond 10 people. Transition to your own entity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then on the tech stack side, I think we mentioned a buy versus build versus wait framework, right?
Correct,
Mm.
correct. I think we have that in the next slide. Give me
Yeah,
a second. Yeah,
yeah,
this
this
one.
one, right? Mm.
Yeah. So by now, global payroll and EOR platforms, like you mentioned earlier, right? Deal, Remote, Oyster,
Mm.
uh, uh, the tax nexus monitoring. There is another one, Avalara and TaxJar.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
then for multi-country insurance, there is Safety Wing for remote teams, and there is another one like Cigna for
Mm.
executives. So I like just wait on those enterprise HRIS Workday until you are past 250 employees. Uh,
Mhm.
Implementation cost and complexity, it's just not justified for smaller teams. So wait
Mhm.
until you scale up, and then you can you know uh, use these frameworks. So
Okay.
message is simple: build internally your async operating system, right? That's your company handbook. Um, your decision documentation templates, your onboarding
Mhm.
place, all that matters.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
no off the shelf tool can replace a well curated company wiki. That's the
Interesting.
bottom line.
And right. And on the HRIS, you mentioned the signal that you need to wait on. Um,
Correct.
so what is that signal?
Yeah, so if you're when you're tracking PTO balances, right, on stock options, vesting becomes like RSUs, right?
Mhm.
So becomes generally it becomes error prone. But when you have a
Mhm.
spreadsheets linking to other spreadsheets,
Mm.
that's when you are crossed the breaking point.
Mm. Interesting. So you need to give that some. You need to reach that stage to. Uh,
Exactly, and that's why we called it as a threshold. Like monitor
Mhm.
that before it. So let's look into this one. Managing fractional executives. This is very interesting
uh,
topic. So I've seen this
yeah.
go around.
Right.
So yeah,
Correct.
go ahead.
Correct, correct. Yeah, no, as we spoke, I think the number one failure mode here is what we call the execution gap.
Mm-hmm.
Again, companies hiring a fractional CMO for strategy. The CMO delivers a brilliant go-to-market plan in a PDF. Then they move on to their next client. The junior team doesn't have the skills to execute, and the plan gathers dust. Right? So
Yeah.
that's what happens mostly when you
So,
have
so what's the fix for
execution.
that?
So, as we have been talking about, bridging the gap between strategy and execution, the
Mm,
engagement, or even of it is of this sort, it should include execution oversight. They should have
mm,
that skin in the game. The fractional leader shouldn't just write the strategy. They should chair the weekly sprint meetings to make sure the full-time team is executing correctly. use things like SOW, statement of work, with specific deliverables, not just a job description. Build the sales playbook, not just oversee the sales
Sales
strategy.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for SMBs out there, natural question in their mind will come like, what's the right time commitment for this?
Yeah. So, typically for most successful engagements, it would be at least 1 to 2 days per week.
Oh, wow.
Less than that, they wouldn't have much context. They wouldn't be engaged to that level. And then more than that could be too expensive. You might then as well hire a full-time equivalent in that place.
Yeah, and the founder needs to be needs to publicly empower them, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely critical. Let's say Jane is a fractional CGO. She speaks with my authority on revenue matters. So without that kind of an explicit permission coming from the CEO, the full-time staff will treat them like an outside consultant. There's a very thin line, a very fine line that the CEOs won't need to dredge here, but they need to make sure that uh, they are working as a full-time staff,
Mm,
not as a consultant here.
correct. So let's shift to sync operations, right? That is something I care deeply about from my operation background.
Right, right, right. I think the core principle here is that small but global teams, they die in asynchronous meetings. So
Yeah,
when your time zone spans 12 hours, you can't require everyone on a Zoom call at the same time. You can't have that without destroying someone's quality of life. You know, so.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I personally have seen it at Amazon. We had this doctrine, document first, right? Every decision went into writing before it was finalized. So we are very big on that, and not like,
Mm.
if you have to document any decision that you take and finalize, but not
Mm.
after, because if you do
Correct.
it, then it's gone, right?
Correct. That's exactly right. And decisions should be made in written RFCs or memos, again stored on what you mentioned earlier in company wikis.
Hmm.
That this practice allows your team to, let's say sitting in Philippines, to read the context during their working day, working hours, and think about it and then contribute meaningfully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the video messaging tools like, Zoom or Loom, they have changed the game, right?
Mm.
Uh, 5 minute screencast, explaining a complex task is often better than a 30-minute live meeting. Think about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And it also captures the tone and nuance without demanding synchronicity. Right? That's the key
Absolutely.
phrase: nuance without synchronicity. You don't have to be there at the same time always.
Absolutely. All right, moving to the
All
next
right.
slide.
Yeah. So let's also talk about the flip side now. I'm sure the other side of the coin, the risks that are associated with this. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, so there are, I think, big three ones, right? First, well, often called as a North Korean IT worker threat. There was an example of it. This is not a hypothetical, by the way. There are
Uh-huh.
active federal cases involving thousands of fraudulent identities.
Okay.
So
How
yeah,
does that work?
yeah. So state actors steal U.S. identities, like
Mhm.
social security number, their all passwords, cyber attacks, through cyber attack. They can apply for remote IT jobs. They interview well, sometimes using deepfakes. Right now with the AI, advanced AI tool, everything can be is possible. And think about, they have an accomplice in the US. Uh, that receives the company laptop and then remote control it from overseas.
Wow.
Uh, those things does happen, right? From your IT logs, everything looks legitimate.
That's scary. But then, what could SMBs do about it? What could be the difference?
Yeah, so the natural solution is biometric, right? Biometric identity verification. That's very crucial nowadays. It's happening, and it's not only used for employment, but visa interviews also, right? That's very going on. So during video interviews, ask candidate to touch their face or turn their head rapidly.
Mhm.
Current defect technology is glitches with rapid movement. right?
Interesting.
Require new hires to log into a specific portal before you ship the hardware to verify their IP
Hmm.
matches their shipping address.
Wow. Okay. What's the second risk then?
Second threat is IP theft, intellectual property theft, enforcing
Hmm.
non-compete and NDA agreements, non-disclosure agreements. You can cross the borders. It's practically impossible. Think about that, because a developer in a jurisdiction with a weak IP
Hmm.
laws can copy your code bases, your databases, and then launch a competitor, right?
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. What would we do about it? What
Yeah,
would we do
how do we
next?
mitigate? I think there is something called fragmentation. Compart, try to segmentalize, like compartmentalize or
Mm-hmm.
segmentalize your access, so no single contractor has that entire picture, right?
Hmm.
So use zero trust architecture. That's very important. That's very going, like, in every software companies now have that zero trust policy. For
Right.
high risk role, they require work on a virtual desktop where copy paste and file extractions are disabled.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we used to have something called need to know basis. So
Yeah,
based on
absolutely
your role, you just need to know the basic things
correct.
there, not everything. All right. So what's the third one? Third
The
risk
third
that you
one
can
is
get?
third one is the cultural entropy. Remote teams, they fail for tribal reasons, not
Mm.
often the technical reason ones. So context collapse, right? People only see the output of decisions, but they do not see the input, which breeds paranoia in the employees. So us versus them, that dynamic between the headquarter and remote employees, that's very, like, real. uh,
Mm.
so look at the regional microcultures that diverge until they can't collaborate anymore.
Mm. Interesting. And the fix seems to be in-person time.
Correct, paradoxically. Yes. Secret to remote work is meeting in person. Successful distributed companies budget for 1 to 2 all company retreats per year.
Right.
So if you think about trust built in 3 days of face-to-face interaction, that
Mm-hmm.
it fuels 6 months of remote collaboration, right?
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. All right. So let's probably give our listeners some hard questions that they should
Ah,
be asking themselves, right?
absolutely.
Or
That's the next slide.
yeah.
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 So first one, right? Are you building a product company or a compliance company? Think about that very deeply. This is a fundamental before you find, like, dive into further deep. So managing 50 people in 15 countries makes you a compliance company. Are you ready for that overhead? Right. The second question is, what's your bus factor on compliance?
Mm-hmm.
If you are a HR, if your one HR manager quits, do you know which countries have filling deadlines next week?
Mm.
Uh, the third one is your culture strong enough to survive the silence?
All right.
Uh,
Yeah.
the remote work is often quiet, as you know.
Okay. Yeah.
Can your team stay motivated without that ambient energy of an office?
That's a tough
That's why
one.
you see that shift to, back to office.
Correct. Yeah.
But yeah, there are pros and cons of that. The fourth one is, have you calculated the hidden cost of that? Right, cybersecurity
Mhm.
insurance increases, then IP legal fees, then cultural decay and whatnot. Right. So what's your actual ROI when you account all these factor in? Right. So think about those. The fifth one is the what happens when the regulatory loopholes close.
Mhm.
If laws change tomorrow to classify your contractor as an employee, what would it mean to your business model? Will it survive?
Mm. Right. Okay, great. So if you have answered these five questions, you should be more than halfway there.
Absolutely. I would say more than 70% there. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at the action plan, right?
Right.
Let's close with this action plan and what should they actually do.
Yes. So, again, a 30, 60, 90-day phased action plan here. In the first 30 days, focus on the foundation, Audit your employee count against the regulatory triggers that we discussed, the 10, 50, 100 regulatory triggers. Map all state and country nexus where you have workers. Identify compliance gaps. Make your EOR versus entity strategy decision. And then,
Yes,
most importantly, document your current processes. Right?
absolutely. And what about
And
the days 31 through 60?
right. So that's the implementation phase. You can deploy a global payroll platform if you don't have one right now. You can implement the tax nexus monitoring. Build your own company handbook wiki. As we mentioned,
Hmm.
it's important to document that stuff, the conversations. Start with how decisions are made and how communication works between these remote teams. You can launch those async communication practices, and you can establish formal statements of work for any fractional executives. Right?
What about the next one, 61 through 90?
Yeah, so that's the optimization phase. Review whether your compliance automation is delivering the ROI that that was planned for or that was promised. You can measure the culture health. We just spoke about how important that becomes. How engaged are your remote employees?
Yeah,
Assess whether any markets justify entity establishment versus just having fractional executives or EOR. And then refine your fractional engagement model. Plan
mm,
your annual on-site retreats and just make sure that there is a good frequency in your in-person meetings.
good point. So, how do you like summarize this in final thoughts? Like,
Well,
what
I
are the
think five key things for this year for 2026 for SMBs to look after or go after. One is the master rule of 10. Use EORs till that threshold for speed planning entities at 10 employees per hub in a way. Two, you just have to automate or die. It sounds harsh, but that's the reality. uh, the actual growth in Reg-Tech is closer to 30%, as we saw. It's
yeah,
not 9%. So buy the tools now. That's the second thing. The third thing is respect the cliffs. Again, be
hmm,
very mindful of crossing those thresholds, those cliffs intentionally, not accidentally. Map your growth against those 10, 50, 100 employee triggers. And then fourth one is make sure that you verify identities. Geopolitical threats are also real.
yeah,
Biometric verification for all remote hires, that should be a must. Uh, Make sure that you use the right tools and techniques for doing that. And then
correct.
lastly, build the async muscle. If your wiki is not optional, it's a mandatory tool. You need to have that.
Documentation is
Document.
important.
Yeah, so it just document as if your company depends on it.
And with the advance of all these AI tools, it's very become easy and productive.
Absolutely.
So use those.
Yeah.
So so what's the bottom line?
Well, the bottom line is that small but global, as what we began with, that kind of an organization is the F1 car of business models. In the fast lane, you're driving in the fast lane now. Highest performance ceiling, but requires the most skilled driver. It's
Correct.
not easy. It's not easy. They're easier than running a local team. It's harder, obviously, but the leverage is infinitely higher.
Yeah.
And with certain muted risks associated with actually having full-grown entity like what global MNCs do, right? So, we think the future belongs to asymmetric enterprises, small
Correct.
in headcount, massive in reach, disciplined in operation. Getting that leverage from a very small set of teams.
Yeah. Well said. Thanks,
Yeah,
Shantanu. And thanks all the SMBs down there listening to us. Thanks for joining us. If you find this valuable, share it with the founder or a leader who you think going thinking about going global. Uh,
mm,
and do let us know your feedback and what are the challenges you're facing. You do like to know so that we can discuss this in our podcast and provide some solutions. And we want this interactive sessions rather than just we talking each other in a silo. So yeah,
Absolutely.
until next time, thank you so much. Next week we'll
Yes.
see you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good week, good weekend. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.